welcome to Skybox Studios. My name's Bob DeFazio, and you're watching GearWire.com. Glad you could join us. I want to give you all a little update on what we've been up to here. You've probably seen the process from scratch, I would imagine, and at this point I want to get into more detail about how our console works and why we chose, for the centerpiece of our studio, the SSL AWS 900 Plus. So it's a 24-channel super analog console, they call it, and that's basically because it functions through the mechanisms of digital and analog simultaneously. So it's sort of the wet dream of a music engineer to be able to, first of all, sit symmetrically in the middle of your speakers. And this SSL is built with a nice leather pane here for your keyboard and mouse. On previous consoles, especially the ones by SSL, I have had to go through all sorts of crazy lengths to get the keyboard and mouse to sit somewhere in the middle of the console. So way to go, SSL, on that one. Next thing is that what you're seeing here, these 24 faders, these 24 faders can be assigned to be analog, actual analog VCAs, or voltage controlled amplifiers, like you'd find on a traditional like E or G series SSL. And then with the touch of a button, the magical blue button right here, the console becomes a control surface. So watch what happens to the whole console when I touch this button. Bam. Now it's a Pro Control. And if you'll notice, up on the computer screen, you should be able to basically watch me control my Pro Tools faders with the faders on the console, so no mouse. I can pan things left and right like you see up there on the left. I can change volume. I can solo. I can mute. I can even, over here, adjust all the buttons and knobs and switches of any Pro Tools plugin or third-party software. So I have the ability to switch between mix and edit windows. I have the ability to go into record. I can pull up different windows like my transport window or my session setup window. Basically, you'd never have to touch the mouse. I don't particularly mind touching the mouse. In fact, I like to think that I'm faster on the mouse than some people might be, even with all this. But I think over time, this could be a little bit more of a feng shui way to work. So you can be working in Pro Tools, changing things in Pro Tools, and then, boom, back to your analog console where you're actually changing the output signals from Pro Tools in the real world, so to speak. So why get this console? Well, I would get this console not for all the things that I've just mentioned, because honest to God, the control surface aspect of this console doesn't change the sound in any way. It's particularly nice for me to be able to move my faders up and down, but honestly, it would sound the same if I did that with the mouse. So I'm not sold just on that. I'm sold on having 24 solid-state noiseless mic preamplifiers with instrument inputs, line and mic inputs, and 24 extremely flexible equalizers and great routing. You've got inserts across every channel. You've got enough aux sends here to do headphone mixes. And then over here on the right side of the console is a good collection of auxiliary returns. And what is really awesome about this console that is much better than, say, E or G series SSL consoles is that the total recall system allows you to recall everything over here as well. So not just your single channel strips, but every button and knob and switch on this entire console can be stored and put back to its place. So you don't need any sheets of paper to save your work on a console like this. So for those of you who are not familiar with what total recall means, I'm going to show you a little bit of total recall. Cool. So one of the obvious necessities of a console that is analog is that it be able to recall itself which basically means that I need some way to be able to reset these buttons and knobs and switches to the exact place that they were when I decided that my mix sounded like a hit single. All right. But then someone came back to the studio and said, oh, we'd like to make a version with vocal harmony, or we want to take our bass guitar part out and replace it with a synthesizer or something like that. Well, what a nightmare it would be if you couldn't easily put all these buttons and knobs and switches back to where they once were. You could take Polaroids of it. That would also be a nightmare. So SSL has a fabulous system of total recall that I'm going to show you, and it goes on inside of the monitor display here on the console. So what you're seeing right here in this window is a breakdown of channel 24. So channel 24 is this row of buttons and knobs and switches right here. And these buttons and knobs and switches correspond to what you see on the output of this monitor here. So I can see that my busing matrix, which is up here, has several yellow buttons, which means that these buttons need to be unpressed in order for it to be put back to the way it was. And so I basically unpress that button. For me to make sure I have my mic preamp at the same level, I just turn my mic preamp knob here to match the line which indicates where it was when I last left off, which is right there. And then I would go to my next knob, set that back to where it was, and I'd go all the way down the channel strip, setting all the knobs back to where they once were. And as you can see, all these knobs were in the 0 position. So this is basically no mix whatsoever. But you can see here this button is yellow, and it shouldn't be. So I'm going to find out which button that corresponds to and make sure that it's set back to where it should be. And the beauty of this SSL, I think, is that they have gotten away from buttons that have actual levers and latches and springs inside of them. So these buttons are actually like pseudo buttons. Like nothing actually clicks in when I push these buttons. It's all digital, which means that it's unlikely to break anytime soon within the next 20, 30 years. And what normally happens on a 30-year-old SSL console is a lot of the buttons get noisy. You push them and they go or okay? And this is a big pain in the for all the engineers out there. And the way that you save all of this total recall data has also been updated, and it is stored via MIDI, system-exclusive MIDI data that you dump from the console into Pro Tools or Cubase or Sonar or Logic or whatever you're using, so that your total recall data is saved on a track with your session. Hooray, it's not on some floppy disk, or it's not going to get lost by some intern. If you have your session, you will also have your total recall data. So it's pretty flawless, and it's very easy to use and easy to manage your files. So once again, well done, SSL.